यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यमुनतीरावनचारि यमुनतीरावनचारि जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 राम 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 जय राधा कृष्ण चंद्र राधे जय राधा वृंदावन चंद्र राधे जय राधा जय श्रीनिवास गोविंदा श्रीनिवास गोविंदा जय श्रीनिवास गोविंदा जय प्रहलाद नरसिम्हा जय प्रहलाद नरसिम्हा जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव प्रभुपाद
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की वृंद देवी तुलसी महारानी की। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, 8th chapter, text number 4. Swam eva dishnyam bahu manayantam. Swameva dishnyam bahu manayantam. Yat vasudeva abhidham amananti. Yadvasudevabhidhamamananti. Pratyak Dritaksha Ambuja Kosham Ishad. Pratyak Dritaksha Ambuja Kosham Ishad. Unmilayantam Vibudhodayaya. Unmilayantam Vibudhodayaya. Swameva dishnyam bahumanayantam. Yadvasudevabhidhamamananti. Pratyagdhritakshambujakoshamishat. Unmilayantam vibudhodayaya. Swameva dishnyam bahumanayantam. Yadvasudevabhidhamamananti. Pratyagdhritakshambujakoshamishat. Unmilayantam vibudhodayaya. Vadishnyam bahumanayantam. Damamananti. Pratyagdhritakshambujakoshamishat. Unmilayantam vibudhodayaya. Pratyagdhritakshambujakoshamishat. Unmilayantam vibudhodayaya. Vadishyam bahumanayantam. Vidam amananti. Pratyagdhritakshambujakoshamishat. Unmilayantam vibudhodayaya. Word meaning. Swam, himself. Eva, thus. Dishnyam, situated. Bahu, greatly. Manayantam, esteemed. Yat, that which. Vasudeva, Lord Vasudeva. Abhidham, by the name. Amananti, acknowledge. Pratyagdhrita aksha, I settle for introspection. Ambuja kosham, lotus-like eye. Ishat, slightly. Unmilayantam, opened. Vibudha, of the greatly learned sages. Udayaya, for the sake of advancement. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. At that time, Lord Sankarsana was meditating upon his Supreme Lord, whom the learned esteem as Lord Vasudeva, but for the sake of the advancement of the great learned sages, he slightly opened his lotus-like eyes and began to speak. Please repeat this translation. At that time, Lord Sankarsana was meditating upon his Supreme Lord, whom the learned esteem as Lord Vasudeva, but for the sake of the advancement of the great learned sages, he slightly opened his lotus-like eyes and began to speak. There is no purport. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta translation.
Translation and purport, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. The sages came from the highest planets down to the lower regions through the water of the Ganges, and therefore the hair on their heads was wet. They touched the lotus feet of the Lord, which are worshipped with various paraphernalia by the daughters of the Serpent King when they desire good husbands. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Ganges water flows directly from the lotus feet of Vishnu. Its course runs from the highest planet of the universe down to the lowest. The sages came down from Satyaloka by taking advantage of the flowing water, a process of transportation made possible by the power of mystic yoga. If a river flows thousands and thousands of miles, a perfect yogi can at once transport himself from one place to another simply by dipping in water. The Ganges is the only celestial river which flows throughout the universe, and great sages travel all over the universe via this sacred river. The statement that their hair was wet indicates that it was directly moistened by the water originating from the lotus feet of Vishnu, the Ganges. Whoever touches the water of the Ganges to his head, she touches the lotus feet of the Lord directly, can become free from all effects of sinful acts. If after taking a bath in the Ganges or being washed of all sins, a man guards himself against committing further sinful acts, then certainly he is delivered. But if he again takes up sinful activities, his bath in the Ganges is as good as that of the elephant, who nicely takes his bath in a river, but later spoils the whole thing by covering himself with dust on the land. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. So we are reading in this chapter how Lord Sankarshana, who is seated at the bottom of the planetary systems, spoke Bhagavatam to the great sages, Sanakadayaha, and they have traveled from the upper planetary systems to this place where Lord Sankarshana is. Here in the two verses that we read today, it says that at that time Lord Sankarshana was meditating upon his Supreme Lord, whom the learned esteem as Lord Vasudeva, but for the sake of advancement of the great learned sages, he slightly opened his lotus-like eyes and began to speak. So, Lord Sankarshana is an expansion of second of the quadruple expansions, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. This Lord Sankarshana, it is explained that Lord Sankarshana has two prominent roles. One is his powerful feature by which he supports all universes. That's how the word Sankarshana, Prabhupada also says, the etymology of the word Sankarshana is Karshana, Karshate means to attract, to draw to oneself. So sankarshate, sankarsha has this a link with law of gravity. Now, scientists say that yes, when two massive bodies are there, there is a kind of a force between them. Now, they go about measuring these forces, so there are forces between the earth and the moon and the sun and all of this. Now, what the scientists don't talk about is what causes this force. What is the source of that force? How does that force come about between two masses? They say that the force exists, but how that force comes about, where that force comes about, scientists don't have a clear understanding. They try to find out, but then at this point of time, they have no understanding about it. But they set that aside, but then they go about measuring the force and understanding and getting a control of the world around us. And they use all of this in the form of technology and try to improve our lives. And that is how people develop a lot of confidence in science and technology, as we see that happening in this world today. But actually, this is not a minor thing. How all of these different things that are happening in the world, who is the architect behind that, who is the designer, and who is overseeing it? Actually, we take so many things granted in this world, like say for instance, we come across a nice flowers, and the flower has such a nice fragrance. We all of us in India, all our lives we have been seeing jasmine flowers and many other flowers, and we just take it for granted. But actually, to make a flower like this and to have a fragrance to it, and that same fragrance and again and again and again, season after season, if that fragrance has to come about, it's not a small thing. Actually, scientists tell us that this jasmine flower, they find out that ultimately it is some kind of an oil. There is a chemical compound which makes the smell as it is. And that chemical compound is a very complex organic molecule. And how all of those carbon, nitrogen, and various other elements are bonded together to form a molecule which actually makes this fragrant smell. At a molecular level, there is manipulation going on day after day, and it's happening all the time. And so we think that is a very small thing, it just happens like that. So if you closely examine, there is a lot of very intricate design and process involved in making all of these things, but somehow we tend to brush that aside and say, no, that's nature is producing. So we marvel at some computers and mobiles and some gadgets like that and say, so well this is done. But if we see, actually this is what is the statement made by one scientist, technologist. He is the one, he is called a founder of the nanotechnology. And he says he derived inspiration for nanotechnology from nature. And he says, if you just analyze a leaf, what goes on in a leaf is far more complicated than the best of the chips that man has, computers that man has ever made. Because in the case of a leaf, it's exposed to the sun, it's drawing energy from the sun and converting that sun, solar energy, drawing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, converting that into usable tissue, cells, and then emitting back oxygen, which is very important for us. Like all the vehicles and machines that we make, it takes away all the good things and gives out carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and all the polluting gases. Whereas, look what plants do. They take away all of these pollutants and give back oxygen. So all of this happens at a microscopic level, at a molecular level. So at that molecular level, this manipulation is happening. You see? But we take this for granted. We don't pay so much attention to all of these things. Nature is actually full of these things. Every aspect of nature is like that. There is, I don't know if I have mentioned this example, some insects, they keep flashing. They keep to attract the mate. The male insects flash. And they all flash to attract female. And there is a certain breeding season where all the male insects, they sit on a big tree, and then each one of them is flashing in the night, right? But they all somehow come together and start flashing in synchronous. So they all flash simultaneously flash in and out, in and out. They synchronize their flashing. Now, actually, if something has to synchronize, we know according to science and technology, there is a lot of timing and very, very precise controls have to be there. But how are these small insects able to time their flashing with each other and able to flash in synchrony? And they have found out that if they have to attract a female mate, and they all have to, if there is one small male and he's flashing, the female may not see it. So they all come together, sit on a tree, and they all flash in synchrony so that they get the attention. And if there is a huge tree with all of them flashing like that, and if there's a male flying in and the two are flashing differently, the male comes and sits on the tree, in a few seconds he will adjust himself and start flashing in the same way. So these are not small things actually happening in nature. And these insects, they give birth to hundreds of them in their lifetime, and all of them start flashing in the same way. How these things are happening? Actually, this is very incredible. This is what now at least some scientists, Eric Bronson, who is the founder of nanotechnology, he talks about these things. I derived inspiration because if you see the engineering that happens in nature, it is simply incredible. Just like our eyelids, we blink precisely at the same time. So the kind of engineering that exists to make the eyelids blink simultaneously. Because if the eyes were blinking in different ways, we would all look very odd, isn't it? They blink exactly the same way. It's well timed, and there is a lot of engineering that goes on. Just like the eye, when we look at something, actually the image of whatever we see, an inverted image is formed in the retina, right? But then there is the optic nerves corrects it, and then in the brain, and then we see everything going on very nicely. So if you see the kind of engineering that exists in our body, which none of us are consciously doing it, we are not doing this, it is there. That is why Krishna says, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma kraham iti manyate. Actually, it is done, it is carried out by the gross and subtle body, which is part of Prakriti. All that the Jiva does is desire. The Jiva desires, and the Lord senses the desire The Lord has given a Prakriti, a material body made of still body and gross body, and all the talent and ability rests in that body, and because of the karma, that body manifests it. Just like suppose I'm a great singer, right? And I can sing so well that people are moved by that, like we have so many good singers in our temple also. We are all moved by their good singing. So, how is this happening? Say for instance, I want to sing, I desire to sing. After that, actually I have no control on my vocal cords, how to adjust the pressure levels of the vocal cords, how to breathe up. Am I doing all of those things? None of those things I'm not involved in it consciously. I have been given a certain body by Prakriti, and that Prakriti, because of my past karma, has a certain ability, and that is manifest. And when Prakriti, when the gross and subtle body is manifesting that, I think I am the great singer. That is why Krishna says, Ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. And Mayadhyakshena prakrite suyate sachara. And who is controlling Prakriti? Krishna is controlling Prakriti. So like this, we fail to see the link one to the other, and we become involved in this material world, and we think that I'm the doer. So this is what is happening. And here we are seeing that Sankarshana is actually the one, it is described that he is upholding all the universes on his hoods, Ananta Shesha. And so that is how on his hoods all the universes are piled up. Someone may think that, oh, so many universes piled up on the head of Shesha, so it must be crushing him, because you know how big buildings in this world so heavy. Imagine the whole earth is crushing, not just the earth, the universe is crushing. The Bhagavatam describes that he is not even conscious of the weight of the universes. They are just like mustard seeds on the hood of a snake. Hardly makes any difference to him. That is the potency. So that is one aspect of Sankarshana. He holds all the universe. Another aspect of Sankarshana is that he is a devotee of the Lord. And he is the Bhakta Avatara. He is an incarnation of the Lord, Lord's own expansion, always wanting to do service to the Lord. So that Lord Ananta Shesha, he takes on the form of the Lord's pillow, the Lord's bedstead, the Lord's chhatri, the Lord's, all of these kind of paraphernalia, and that is how he serves the Lord personally. So these are the two functions of Sankarshana. He has a potent feature and a devotional feature. In his potent feature, he is upholding all the universes, and his devotional feature, he is serving the Lord in different ways. That is why it says here, at that time, Lord Sankarshana was meditating upon his Supreme Lord, whom the learned esteem as Lord Vasudeva. But for the sake of the advancement of great learned sages, Vibudha Udayaya, Vibudha, they were very great learned sages, and for their Udayaya, for their upliftment, for their enlightenment, he slightly opened his eyes, and then we will see what more happens after that. That is the first verse. And the next verse talks about how these sages have come all the way from the higher planetary system down to the lower planets. Why did the sages travel from the higher planet to the lower planet? Because they wanted to hear from Sankarshana. So Lord Sankarshana always resides at the lower planetary system, because all of the planetary systems are above his hood, and there in his feature as Sankarshana, and he's constantly glorifying, he's meditating and also glorifying, enlightening the sages. This is another feature of the Lord. And so these sages traveled all the way. How they travel? Here it says they traveled through the Ganges. And Prabhupada is saying in the purport that there is a mystical process by which these mystic yogis, they dip in one river and they can rise up in another river. And there is some kind of a mystical process of transportation under water. And so this kind of a transportation can happen not only within Earth, it can happen from within planets also. So they travel through the river. If a river flows thousands and thousands of miles, a perfect yogi can at once transport himself from one place to another simply by dipping in its water. The Ganges is the only celestial river which flows throughout the universe, and great sages travel all over the universe via this sacred river. And the statement that their hair was wet indicates that it was directly moistened by the water originating from the lotus feet of Vishnu. Whoever touches the water of Ganges to his head surely touches the lotus feet of the Lord directly and can become free from all effects of sinful acts. So basically, the living entity, if he has to make any spiritual advancement, that advancement comes about when we come in touch with the spiritual potency of the Lord. And when we chant Hare Krishna, that is what is happening. We are chanting the Lord's holy name, and has potency. When we hear Bhagavatam, which is a description of the Lord's activities, Lord's qualities, there is a spiritual potency in it. When we do worship of the Lord, the deity worship, there is a spiritual potency. When we honor prasadam, there is a spiritual potency. So actually all these activities connected with the Lord have spiritual potency, and when we come in touch with that, there is a enlightenment, mitigation of sinful activities, and waking up the soul from the forgetfulness. All of this happens. So this is there in the Vedic process, that when you take water from Ganges, why is it so? Because Ganges has washed the lotus feet of the Lord, and so that Ganges is flowing. And now someone may say we may wash ourselves with Ganges, but then why we are still not having all the spiritual realization that we must have? That is explained here, that yes, we may cleanse ourselves, but then our attitude is such that, our consciousness is such that we once again go about committing sins. So there is a sinful desire in us which forces us to commit sinful activities, and once again we become entangled. This is discussed in the Bhagavatam, and says that yes, there are many prayaschitta processes recommended in the Vedas, but actually that's not very powerful. That is not effective in the long term, because one may do some prayaschitta, but then the seeds of sinful desires remain, and the seeds once again sprout and once again causes sinful activities. So here Prabhupada is saying, whoever touches the water of the Ganges to his head surely touches the lotus feet of the Lord directly and can become free from all effects of sinful acts. If after taking a bath in the Ganges or being washed of all sin, a man guards himself against committing further sinful acts, then certainly he is delivered. So this is what as devotees, as serious devotees, we should do. We should guard ourselves against committing further sinful acts. Then all our devotional activities we do will manifest their full potency and will have the full effect on us by purifying us and keeping us in a transcendental plane. So it's very important, if we have to come in contact with Krishna, if we have to come in touch with Krishna, we have to rise to the level of Krishna. The level of Krishna is transcendental level. Krishna's position is in a transcendental position. So if we have to interact with him, if we have to associate with him, we have to rise to that level. Right now, our consciousness is contaminated by the modes of nature. So the process to elevate oneself is to come to this stage where we are free from sinful activities. That is why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Esham tva antagatam papam ejana punya karmanaha te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam drudhavrata. If we have to come to the level of rendering devotional service, one has to put an end to sinful activities. Why bhakti is not possible for everyone? Why bhakti is not recommended freely to everyone? So many other processes, karma kanda, jnana kanda, all that is recommended because not everyone is ready to put an end to sinful activities. They are all driven by sinful desires, and so they need a slow process, and then they can only carry on that intensity of purification. But ultimately, yoga means bhakti yoga. All other processes of yoga are meant to gradually bring someone to bhakti yoga, because it's only bhakti yoga which brings us to the stage of a transcendental stage, and in that transcendental stage we can actually associate with the Lord. That's what bhakti is promising. Bhagavatam is promising that we can come to a state of consciousness where we can experience the presence of the Lord, where we can associate with the Lord. And it's not a small thing to come in the presence or to come in touch with the Lord. It's a very powerful experience. But we cannot come to that stage unless we rise ourselves to a transcendental plane. We can't rise to a transcendental plane unless we give up sinful activities. That is why the process of Krishna consciousness is very simple, but it requires determination and perseverance to continuously follow it up and maintain that desire, to guard ourselves from committing sinful acts. Then we can be delivered. But if he again takes up sinful activities, his bath in the Ganges is as good as that of the elephant, who nicely takes his bath in a river, but later spots the whole thing by covering himself with dust on the land. So those who are serious in Krishna conscious practice, this is what Prabhupada expects us to do. If you see Prabhupada, what he demanded at the time of initiation, he demanded only two things. One is to chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna mantra. Another is to abstain to follow the 4 regulative principles. Actually, Srila Prabhupada made the whole process so simple. It is these two things that are very, very important. Abstaining from sinful activities and chanting. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is actually very merciful. He wants to give love of Krishna to everyone. But one condition he also puts. That is, Vishaya Chadiya Serase Majiya Mukhe Bolo Hari Hari. You can, it's a very Para Karuna Pahudui Jana. Chaitanya and Nityananda are very merciful. They want to give us the highest reward. But they say, Vishaya Chadiya. You have to give up sense gratification. You have to give up sinful activities. And Mukhe Bolo Hari Hari. And become absorbed, say Rase Majiya, and become absorbed in serving the Lord. And by chanting the holy names of the Lord. So this is the process, and Srila Prabhupada has made that very simple. But we have to consistently follow this, chanting and following the 4 regulative principles. Then we can rise to the transcendental stage and then experience advanced Krishna consciousness. We'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.